The pen felt heavier than it should have. Margot Delacroix Webb sat at the kitchen table she had picked out herself, solid maple, from a little shop on Queen Street West, and stared at the signature line at the bottom of the dissolution agreement. Outside, February was doing what February always does in Toronto, pressing its gray face against the window, indifferent to everything happening inside. Her lawyer had told her to take the weekend. Think it over, sleep on it. She hadn't slept in 4 days. Across the table, Harrison's lawyer, a compact, efficient man named Aldous Kent, who smelled faintly of cedar, sat with his hands folded, watching her the way a person watches a slow clock. He wasn't unkind, he was simply done. Harrison was already done. Had been done, Margot would later understand, long before he told her. She pressed the pen to the paper, signed her name in the same careful cursive her mother had made her practice every summer at the dining room table in Moncton. Then she put the pen down, stood up, and walked to the window so she didn't have to watch Aldous Kent gather his papers. "We'll be in touch regarding the condo," he said. She nodded at the glass. The door clicked shut behind him. And then Margot Delacroix Webb, 38 years old, former VP of brand strategy at one of the most recognized design firms in the country, pressed her forehead against the cold window and let herself cry for exactly 7 minutes. She counted. It seemed important to put a limit on it. She had 9 weeks left of her pregnancy. She was carrying twins. Harrison Webb did not know that yet. She had found out the day before he told her about Celeste. They had been together for 6 years, married for 3. He was an architect. She was good at her job. They had fit together the way 2 competent people often do. Efficiently, admirably, without a great deal of friction. Their friends called them the power couple. Margot had never loved that phrase. It made their marriage sound like a business arrangement. Maybe it had been. She met Celeste Beaumont exactly once, at Harrison's firm's winter gala, 8 months before the divorce. Celeste was 26, worked in editorial fashion, and had the kind of effortless beauty that made other women feel they were standing slightly wrong. She had shaken Margot's hand warmly, complimented her earrings, and laughed at something Harrison said, with a familiarity that Margot filed away without examining too closely. She was good at not examining things too closely. She had always called it perspective. She understood later it was just avoidance with better branding. Harrison told her on a Sunday. He was very calm. He said he had been unhappy for a long time, and he believed she had been too, and wasn't it better to be honest now than to keep performing a marriage neither of them truly wanted? He used the word performing. He said he and Celeste had not planned it. He said he was sorry. He said he hoped they could be civil. Margot asked him to leave. He did. She sat on the bathroom floor for a while, then remembered she was pregnant, got up, and ate a bowl of cereal because the midwife had said to keep her iron up. The next 14 weeks were the kind that don't make it into the highlight reel people curate for themselves later. Harrison's team moved quickly on the paperwork. She had a lawyer, a woman named Sandra Park, who came recommended by a colleague. But Sandra was good at family law, not at the particular kind of adversarial wealth protection Harrison's team specialized in. The settlement offer was technically legal and almost insulting. The condo went to Harrison. It was in his name. She received a sum of money that would cover perhaps 8 months of Toronto rent at her current standard of living, and a non-disclosure clause about the circumstances of the separation. Sign it and be done, or fight it and spend the next 18 months in litigation, Sandra told her. You're already exhausted, Margot, and you're going to have 2 babies in 2 months. She signed it. She moved into a rental on Ossington, a 2-bedroom flat above a Portuguese bakery, where the smell of warm bread came up through the floorboards every morning. She told herself it was cozy. Some days she believed it. She did not tell Harrison about the twins. She had tried twice to call him. The first time, he let it go to voicemail. The second time, Celeste answered his phone and said, in a genuinely pleasant voice, that Harrison was in a meeting. Could she take a message? Margot hung up. She told herself it was a decision, not a defeat. She had her girls on a Thursday in early May at Mount Sinai Hospital, with Sandra in the waiting room because Margot's had no one else to call. Her mother offered to fly from Moncton. Margot said she was fine. Her mother flew anyway and arrived 6 hours after the birth, walked into the recovery room, took one look at her daughter holding 2 very small sleeping babies, and said in French, "Oh, my darling girl." She named them Iris and Fern. The man who would change everything entered Margot's life through the most ordinary of doors. A shared elevator in the building where she had taken a contract position 8 months after the birth. She had gone back to work partly for financial reasons, and partly because staying home alone with 2 infants and her own thoughts had begun to feel like a slow emergency. The contract was with a mid-size brand consultancy on King Street, not glamorous but steady. The kind of work she could do with one hand while holding a bottle with the other, which was, in those months, essentially the requirement. He was in the elevator when the doors opened. Tall, dark coat, reading something on his phone with the focused, slightly distracted expression of someone who processes information quickly and continuously. He looked up when she got in, nodded, looked back down. "Sorry, are you Margot Delacroix-Webb?" he said, just before the doors closed on the 7th floor. She turned. "I am. I read your case study on the Meridian rebrand. The one in the strategy issue last year." He said it the way people sometimes do when they've been sitting on a compliment and the opportunity finally presents itself. It was genuinely excellent work. "I'm Theo Marchetti." He held out his hand. "I'm on the 8th floor. Marchetti Advisory." She shook it. "Thank you. The part about repositioning Legacy Trust as a competitive advantage rather than a liability, I've been thinking about it for 6 months. Good thinking or annoying thinking?" He smiled. It was a good smile, unhurried. Both, honestly. The elevator reached her floor. She stepped out. He held the door a moment. "There's a decent coffee spot on Adelaide if you ever want to keep that conversation going," he said. "No pressure. I'll think about it," she said. She thought about it for 2 days and then went. Theodore Marchetti, Theo, he insisted, was 43 years old, ran a small but well-regarded management advisory firm, and had the quality Margot had rarely encountered in successful men. He was genuinely curious about other people. Not performatively curious. Not the kind of interested that was really just waiting to be interesting back, but actually, specifically curious. He remembered things. He asked follow-up questions 3 weeks after initial conversations. He did not treat her professional opinions as things to be politely indulged. He also did not ask about her personal life for the first 2 months of their coffee meetings, which she respected more than she could easily articulate. When she finally told him, haltingly, over terrible pad thai from the place across from her office, he listened without interrupting, without the furrowed brow of performative empathy, and without the reflexive "you're so strong" that she had learned to dread. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "How are Iris and Fern doing?" he asked. She blinked. "I what?" "You mentioned them last week. The one who doesn't sleep and the one who sleeps too much." "Iris sleeps like a stone and wakes up furious about it." He laughed. She laughed. Something loosened between them that had been tight for a very long time. He met the girls 6 weeks later. Margot had thought long and hard about it, consulted her mother on the phone at 11 p.m., made 2 lists, crossed things out, and eventually decided that she was a grown woman with good instincts and she was allowed to trust them. He came over on a Saturday afternoon with a bag from a toy shop on Bloor that he had clearly spent real time in, because he asked Fern whether she liked soft things or noisy things before handing her anything. And when Fern, 8 months old, suspicious of everyone, reached up and grabbed his finger and refused to let go, Margot's had to turn around and look very hard at the wall for a moment. Theo said nothing. He just sat on the floor with Fern and waited. She did not know what Harrison knew or when he found out. She had kept the twins out of her public social media, mostly out of a bone-deep instinct that felt more like survival than privacy. And she had never reached out to him again after the day Celeste answered his phone. She had, it turned out, a significant capacity for clean exits when she felt they were warranted. It was Sandra who called her, 11 months after the birth, on a Tuesday morning when Iris had a cold and Fern was teething and Margot's was running on approximately 4 hours of sleep and cold coffee. "He's filed," Sandra said. Margot sat down on the floor of the kitchen, the same way she had sat on the bathroom floor the night he told her. Old habits. "Filed what? Custody application." "He says he wasn't informed of the pregnancy. He wants access, possibly shared custody." A pause. "Margot, he has very good lawyers." She sat there for a long moment, listening to Iris cough in the next room. "So do I," she said. "You have me." I know, but I need more than you. She hired Dominique Ferreira the following week. Dominique was 49, ran one of the most respected family law practices in Ontario, had 17 years of experience in high-conflict custody cases, and had a reputation for being completely unmoved by the kind of financial pressure Harrison's team could bring to bear. Her retainer was significant. Margot liquidated a portion of her RRSP and did not apologize to herself about it. Dominique reviewed the case and called her back within 48 hours. "Here's what I want you to understand," she said. "He abandoned a pregnant woman without disclosing he knew she was pregnant, which he may argue he didn't know, but we have texts. You tried to contact him twice. He did not respond. He has had no involvement in these children's lives. The law in this province is clear about the weight given to established primary caregivers, and you are the sole established primary caregiver of 2 children under 1 year old. A pause. He doesn't have a case. He has money, which is not the same thing. What does his application actually say? It says he was denied the opportunity to be involved. It says you deliberately concealed the pregnancy. Another pause. It's framing. It's designed to make you defensive so you spend the proceeding justifying yourself instead of him justifying his absence. What do? We don't defend. We document." Dominique's voice was brisk and certain, in the way of someone who had seen this particular maneuver before. Every text, every unanswered call, every record of his whereabouts in the months following the divorce, the social media posts of him and his partner in Tulum 3 weeks after you gave birth. All of it. Margot found herself writing notes in the margin of a grocery list. Old habits again. "Okay," she said. "There's one more thing." "What?" "He's going to try to make this about your financial situation. He'll argue you can't provide adequately. His team will point to your income bracket relative to his, the size of your apartment, the fact that you're working contract positions. What do I say to that?" "Nothing." Dominique was quiet for a moment, and then, "He pays nothing toward the upbringing of his own children, which he will need to explain to a judge. By the time we're done, he won't be applying for custody. He'll be calculating child support." The hearing was set for April. In the weeks between, Margot noticed things she might not have noticed otherwise. The way the city moved around her, ordinary and oblivious to the fact that her life was being sorted and resorted by courts and documents and phone calls from lawyers. The bakery downstairs still smelled of bread in the mornings. Iris still woke up furious. Fern still grabbed at things with absolute conviction. Theo came over on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He had suggested the schedule, not Margot. Gently, without pressure, making clear that he was there if she wanted him, and equally fine if she needed space. He brought food more often than not, which she appreciated in a way that was hard to say out loud. He read to the girls when they would sit still for it, which was not very often, and he learned, with no prompting, that Fern's favorite thing was being sung to, and that Iris would only fall asleep if someone put a hand firmly on her back, not lightly, firmly, as if to say, "I'm here, I'm not going anywhere." Margot's mother came back from Moncton in March, and stayed in the second bedroom, which made things both better and more crowded and was on balance the right call. "This man," her mother said one evening, watching Theo build something architecturally ambitious out of foam blocks with Iris. "He is serious about this." "Don't," Margot said. "I'm not doing anything. You have your serious face on." Her mother looked at her. "You could let someone in, you know. It doesn't mean the last time counts as nothing. It just means you're still here." Margot looked at Theo on the floor with her daughter. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The preliminary hearing was held on a cold Thursday in April, in a courtroom that smelled like old carpet and wood polish. Harrison was there with 2 lawyers in a suit that cost more than Margot's monthly rent. He looked, she noted with some detachment, uncomfortable. Not guilty, or not only guilty, but uncomfortable, which was different. He caught her eye once across the room and looked away first. Celeste was not there. Margot had wondered, in a quiet corner of herself, whether she would be. Dominique had prepared her thoroughly. Don't speak unless asked. Don't react to anything Harrison's team says. Don't show him anger, because anger is the one thing they can use. What Margot showed him was nothing. Years of brand strategy had taught her one thing above all else. Control the narrative by controlling what you give them to work with. Harrison's lead lawyer, a man named Patrick Ouellette, who had the self-assurance of someone accustomed to winning before the other side has finished speaking, argued that Margot had systematically denied his client access and knowledge during a critical period. He used phrases like deliberate concealment and parental alienation and good faith engagement. He was fluent and polished, and Margot watched Dominique not react to any of it, which she found oddly calming. Then Dominique stood up. She did not use dramatic language. She did not raise her voice. She presented the phone records from the 2 calls Margot had made in the weeks following the divorce, and the voicemail, one voicemail 34 seconds, that Margot had left Harrison asking him to call her back. She presented the social media record of Harrison and Celeste in Lisbon the week Margot gave birth, publicly posted, publicly tagged, publicly captioned with the words "New Beginnings." She presented the financial records showing that Harrison had contributed precisely $0 to the care of his children in the 11 months since their birth. She presented a written statement from the obstetrics team at Mount Sinai and a record of every single pediatric appointment, immunization, sick day, and emergency clinic visit attended solely by Margot Delacroix-Webb. Then she sat down. The presiding judge, a small, unreadable woman named Honorable Justice Marie-André Cote, looked at the record for a long time. She asked Harrison's team 2 questions. The first was whether Mr. Webb could produce any evidence of an attempt to contact Ms. Delacroix-Webb between the date of the divorce and the date of his custody application, over 11 months later. The second was whether he could produce any evidence of having contributed, financially or otherwise, to the care of the children during that same period. Patrick Ouellette answered both questions carefully. The answer to both was no. The settlement conference 3 weeks later lasted one afternoon. Harrison's team did not get custody. They did not get unsupervised access, not immediately. What the court ordered was a phased introduction, supervised visits, monthly, with a review in 6 months, which Dominique told Margot was actually generous given the circumstances, and which Margot accepted because Dominique told her to, and because, on some level, she hadn't fully admitted to herself yet. She believed her daughters deserved to make their own decisions about their father when they were old enough to make decisions. What the court also ordered was child support, calculated based on Harrison's disclosed income, which was significant. Patrick Ouellette filed an objection to the disclosure methodology. Dominique smiled at Margot in a way that suggested she had anticipated this and would enjoy addressing it. Harrison was required to pay retroactively from the date of the twins' birth. Margot did not celebrate. She stood outside the courthouse on University Avenue in her good coat, in the thin April sun, and called her mother. "It's done," she said. "Oh, thank God," her mother said. "Ma fille, don't cry. I'm not crying." She was absolutely crying. Margot laughed, first time in a week, and it felt strange and good and too big for the sidewalk. She stood there a little longer than she needed to, just to let it settle. There was one more moment. There had to be. It was the kind of thing that sounds, when you describe it later, like something from a film, which Margot acknowledged freely, because she was a person who had spent her career thinking about the stories people tell themselves, and she knew the difference between what actually happens and what we remember happening. What she remembered was this. It was the Carver Foundation Gala in June. She was there professionally. She had been brought in to consult on the rebrand of a mid-sized charitable organization, and the gala was the public launch of that new identity. It was her work on that room. Every visual element, every piece of copy on every panel, every brand decision about how the organization wanted to be seen and remembered. She was standing near the bar talking to the foundation's executive director when she saw Harrison across the room. He was with Celeste, who was, Margot had to concede, genuinely beautiful in a way that didn't require her own diminishment to acknowledge. They were with another couple, laughing at something. Harrison looked comfortable, the way he had always looked comfortable. That was the quality she had once found most attractive about him, and now recognized as the quality that had made everything so clean for him. He moved through the world without friction, because he generated the friction elsewhere and left it behind. He saw her. She watched him register it, watched him register the room, her work on every wall, and then register the context. Watched some small calculation happen behind his eyes. She did not look away. She did not adjust her expression. She lifted her glass slightly. The way you acknowledge someone you have thoroughly finished with, and turned back to the executive director and said, "You were saying about the Northern Community programs." She heard much later in the evening from a woman she vaguely knew in the arts community that Harrison and Celeste had left early. She did not ask why. Theo proposed on a Saturday, at home, in the kitchen above the bakery, with bread smell coming up through the floorboards, and Iris asleep in the next room, and Fern in his arms because Fern had decided that evening that she was only comfortable being held by Theo, which she communicated through a combination of reaching arms and pointed refusal to look at anyone else. It was not a grand gesture. There was no ring box produced from a coat pocket at a restaurant. He simply said, in the middle of a conversation about something else entirely, "I'd like to do this for a long time. I'd like it to be a decision we make together, if you want that." Margot's was quiet for a moment. "You're proposing with a baby in your arms," she said. "She wouldn't let me put her down." That's Fern's honest opinion of this plan. He looked down at Fern, who was holding his collar and looking at him with the absolute sovereign certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "She seemed like a good character reference," he said. Margot crossed the kitchen and put her arms around both of them, around Theo and Fern and the whole warm, ordinary, impossible fact of this moment, and said yes into his shoulder, quietly, like something she'd been holding for a long time and was finally ready to put down. Outside, spring was happening the way it happens in Toronto, late and sudden and so bright it almost hurts. The girls would grow up knowing two things with certainty: that their mother had never once stopped fighting for them, and that the man who read to them and remembered which one liked soft things and which one woke up furious had chosen them deliberately, completely, on a Saturday in a small flat above a bakery on Ossington Avenue. That was enough. That was everything.